happening today. But we will start with this. The NIL, there was a hearing today in Congress. Here is Ross Dellinger, and he goes, listen, this is the one with Georgia, Buddy Carter had an aide walk into the room and stand behind him holding a massive cardboard sign of the Georgia G. And then before that, he talked about that entered the hearing carrying a small Georgia Bulldog statue while slipping on a red UGA coat. He plopped down next to the representative with the Gators helmet on her desk. So today the NIL was supposed to be in front of Congress, and it was. And there's just one of the responses today. One of the other ones from our good friend Pete Dacos with the NIL. He's the one that covers NIL for On3. There were no NIL collectives, representatives, or agents at this hearing.
Yeah, you would figure you would ask them about it. I mean, most of the time you have a congressional hearing, especially if collective agents are painted as the villains here in a lot of these things. So some of them are. Obviously, there are people who are predatory and not having good practices, and some of them aren't. So it would be nice to hear from especially a legitimate one, because you want to know what their practices are and how this is going, but they didn't. There were a couple of good questions asked. I was really impressed with Trey Burton.
Trey Burton, the
former Gator quarterback in the Philly Special. That's what you know him from. But in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. But, yeah, really impressed with Trey Burton, the way he handled it. And I'm forgetting the softball player, Kaylee Mudge, I want to say her name is, from Florida State. She was really, really interested to hear from, and both of them were cautious about students becoming employees because it loses a bit of their, Trey Burton, you referred to it as IP, their individual property. And if they collectively bargain that, then there's going to be things that they could forfeit. They seem to like the setup as it is now, with some cleaning up needed to do. And then we heard from the College Football Players Association representative who thought that they needed to unionize. So you got to hear both sides of it. But it's interesting to hear to me that is not going to be as rubber stamped as something as we might, think when it comes to name, image, and likeness and unionization. Not every player is for it because of what it stands for, but most of it was a bunch of uninformed buffoons, grandstanding and trying to, make it look like they care, and they had done no research on anything. And it was
one of those comments I saw was that you realize when you're in one of these is how much people don't know really who are the ones listening and making decisions down the road.
Yeah, and the thing is that they have a lot more important things to deal with than name, image, and likeness. Not that this isn't important, but if they were this bad on this thing that is not, then how can we trust these people to be good on something that's important? It was just, at times.
I mean, yeah, I don't really have anything to add to the festivities today or anything. I guess throwing up Ross Dellinger tweets, the last one's probably the one that is the one that sums it up best. The real takeaway is the lack of understanding from lawmakers on the issue after 21 months of congressional hearings. Based on the questions, these members need an NIL 101 course. This does not bode well for quick legislation in the House, which I started hearing in the House and the Senate. I'm like,
yeah.
I mean, I like right away, I just am like, but yeah, I mean, that's his takeaway, and he's on that as much as anybody. So it sounds like we're nowhere close to this being a step towards any resolution. It's just part of the road that we're going to trek down in terms of, everybody trying to figure out what this looks like ultimately. But yeah, like Paul said, some people are in favor of unionization. Some people are, a little bit more wary. I think it probably depends on the sport you play. I think it depends on, your understanding of things the way they are and the way that things would be under an alternative model. And yeah, I do think that there's some people that would benefit probably from unionization, but I don't know if that's the beneficial move for everybody because of all that would also come with that. It's not as though you just be deemed an employee and you get all the benefits and none of the drawbacks, which seems to be kind of the way people want this to go, is all the good things, we want that, all the negative things, oh no, that doesn't apply here. And there's going to have to be some give and take somewhere. Like, this isn't just going to be a slam dunk for the student athlete, but it does seem like they're getting at the very bare minimum, a nice layup eventually in this thing, because they're not the group that's on the defensive here. They're the group that's very much on the offensive, and you just hope the people in charge of that offense are in it mostly for the right reasons and steering in the right direction, because you do know, like I know that the NCAA's tried to do the whole boogeyman thing with, bad characters and try to paint, collectives and things a certain way. That's not the case for everybody, but there is that danger. So when you're hearing a point of view, just realize who it's coming from, whether it be the pro-union or the anti-union, whatever stance that might be taken. But yeah, it seems like there's a long way to go with this. And you're right, Paul, our government does have a lot more important things to worry about. So I don't know where this goes next, but there's some lacking of knowledge that seems like a pretty important missing piece right now.
We'll go backwards on this. Matt Brown, who we've had on this show, who covers college athletics,
on Friday.
When most ADs and conference leaders say this sort of thing, I roll my eyes. It's an empty threat. But when the Patriot League says they'd probably drop sports if all college athletes became employees, I believe them. And this came from Commissioner Jennifer Heppel. The most significant unknown at this time is if the legal outcomes that face the NCAA will offer an alternative, for example, non-employees' path for the continued sponsorship of intercollegiate athletics within higher education. What she basically says is if it gets to that point, then they will absolutely have to look at the opportunity, or at least the option, of dropping some collegiate sports.
Well, yeah, because not everybody can afford to have 1,000 new employees, and right. So that's the thing about it. One of the questions posed was in the hearing today was, how can football unionize and then softball not? Well, quite simply because football has money behind it and softball does not, so there are now different things. The football and men's basketball are on a business model that is different than the rest of the sports. And failure to acknowledge that by a lot of parties, or at least to try to say that things are the same, they probably need to figure out some sort of middle ground on that, because there's other things that supersede the business model, like Title IX and all that has to be accounted for. But again, you start unionizing and you're not talking about Title IX anymore. You're talking about employment law. So it all goes a little bit differently all down the line. And so there are really complicated things. Yes. Can Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State afford to have 1,000 new employees tomorrow? Yep. Absolutely, they could. Can a school in the Patriot League? No.
This is the 8th hearing on NIL, and Ross Dellinger earlier today, before it started, said, if you're expecting something revolutionary, you should know that the last 7 NIL hearings resulted in the passage of 0 bills. So that's from up in Congress today. Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, I think he made a Zoom appearance and had a statement afterwards, but was not in attendance. And again, nobody who represents a collective or an NIL agent or otherwise was there, which is kind of doesn't make sense either, to try to get their, let them talk.